Izuku Midoriya was born, and he was born differently than anybody else. Because Izuku was just an ordinary kid for a very long time. Izuku wanted to be a hero so badly. He idolized someone like All Might and continued to just want to strive for that specifically. Strive to be like All Might. Strive to be just as good, if not better, than the number one hero. But we all know that dream is very, very hard to reach, especially when at the age of 4, he is deemed quirkless. But here's the thing. What many others didn't understand is that Izuku would be a rare case in this instance, a rare case that would kind of shake up everything in hero society. So in the very beginning, Izuku was obsessed with martial arts. And he actually got into a lot of martial arts classes, and it ranged from many different things. We're talking karate, we're talking regular kickboxing, we're talking judo, we're talking jujitsu, anything you can think of. He was really obsessed with it. Now, he didn't know why exactly, and frankly, he never would know the actual reason, but he was obsessed with it all. And he would continue to do this throughout his, childhood, and he would quickly realize how much stronger, how much faster he is than most, if not every kid that has a quirk. And they would go to the doctors on multiple occasions asking if it's true, if he really doesn't have a quirk. And they would tell him, they would do studies, they would do multiple new things, and they would tell him no, he doesn't have a quirk, nothing, absolutely zero. And this would confuse Inko, or Izuku's mom, because at the end of the day, it seemed as if he did. I mean, the kid is extremely strong, extremely fast, and on top of that, he learns extremely quickly. He learns martial arts and all of these other things extremely fast. But there's also something else that begins to, arise within Izuku, you could say. Something that is, not very heroic. Izuku would start craving things that a normal person would not be craving. He would start craving human flesh. Now, he would be able to resist the urge for a while, and he would even bring this up to his mother, bringing up the idea that he feels this odd urge for blood and for this, and he can't get it to stop, and he doesn't know what to do, and it's daunting, it's terrifying. He doesn't understand why it's happening. And the longer he goes, seemingly with this craving, as he enters, the age of 12, 13, he continues to feel worse and worse, and his strength continues to deteriorate slowly but surely. And one day, his mother is on the brink of just, getting blood or something, or stealing from a blood bank as soon as possible, and she doesn't know what to do. She's honestly considering it. She is genuinely considering just stealing from a blood bank and helping her son, because at the end of the day, this is ridiculous. This is her son is going through absolute hell, is what it seems, and she knows that she can stop it. She can actually help. But before she can actually do this, before she can actually do this crime specifically, Izuku would fall into this deep slumber. But this slumber, it's something odd. Izuku's not reacting, not doing anything. And frankly, doctors and scientists, many people come over and they just deem that he's in a coma, that he's in some sort of a coma. And of course, this isn't exactly what's going on with Izuku, but that's, for the most part, kind of what it is. And Izuku's mom, or Inko, would kind of have to monitor Izuku the best she possibly can. Would have to make sure that he's okay, make sure that everything's fine, and months would go by. Shoot, even close to a year. And eventually, Izuku would wake up. Izuku would finally wake up. Izuku would awaken and he would be looking around, asking what's going on, what's happening, and frankly, like just what's going on in general. I mean, it's been forever, it feels like, and he has no idea what's happening. In which his mother is excited to see that, well, he's fine, that everything is okay. But as he awakens, his eyes have changed, and it seems as if his eyes have changed in color slightly, and they're more like yellowish, and he has tattoos, it seems, that have now appeared on his body, some slashing across his face from the top of his head to the bottom of his face. And then on top of that, some on his body, but his clothes cover up most of them. But it seems as if these just appeared, like out of thin air. Like they just out of nowhere just appeared. And nobody understands how this could even be possible, how this happened. And frankly, Inko has no idea what's going on with her son. But he wakes up and he's a completely different person. He's completely fine. He's stronger than ever, and he's just ready to go. And it's very, very odd because she was kind of expecting her son to be in a bad place for a long time, but now that he's awake, he's even more powerful. He's even faster. He's even stronger, and he has more enthusiasm for learning more martial arts. And it seems as if he even gained powers that are unordinary, seemingly gaining powers that have leveled him up to even a larger degree. It's something very, very odd, but it seems as if it seems as if he's just, a different person, and he's, grown in strength, and he even has some techniques now that are kind of an interesting thing. It seems like he has techniques that are completely out of the ordinary for him in terms of just flat out strength. But as always, since Izuku's been taking a bit of a nap, you could say, and that's, of course, an understatement, he's going to have to, catch up on some things that he currently is behind on. And of course, he can do that. He's going to catch up on some things he is behind on for the most part. And he's going to catch up on some studying and some stuff like that. And overall, and frankly, he's going to be very prepared for the UA entrance exam that is coming up sooner than you could possibly imagine. He still has to go through the rest of his middle school and stuff like that, be prepared overall. But his sights are mainly focused on the UA entrance exam, and he feels absolutely empowered. He feels ready. He feels ready to go. And frankly enough, I mean, he is to another level. I mean, his strength is off the charts, and he's at a totally different level than he's ever been at in his life. And frankly, all the bullying, anybody who tries to bully him, it don't work, and it's not even close. And frankly, he hasn't been dealing with anything other than that. I mean, some simple bullying, a little bit, that's fine. But he hasn't been dealing with any outsourced things, you could say. It seems as if he's gained quite a bit of strength. He has gained that, the whole blood thing. But it seems as if he's not dealing with any sunlight issues, you could say. Now, he doesn't know anything about any sunlight issues in general, but at least for now, he's not dealing with it, at least, in the moment. Now, Izuku has just gotten ready for the UA entrance exam. He hasn't really thought about anything other than flat out just getting ready. I mean, he's been preparing, he's been, grinding, he's been training, he's been doing anything he possibly can to get himself to the point that he knows he'll be ready for whatever this exam has for him, and that includes studying hard and so on, and he's been kind of just ignoring everybody, and until the very last day of school, after all the normal stuff happens in school, kind of goes in disarray, you could say. Because he goes to head home. It's just a normal day in Izuku's life, and he starts heading home. And as he's heading home, he can sense somebody below him about to burst through a manhole cover. Yes, the sludge villain would come out of a manhole cover and immediately try to attack Izuku, telling him that he's going to take over his body and there's nothing he could do about it. Now, this is where Izuku turns around and absolutely shows how he's levels above so many of the villains that exist to this day, because he easily is able to dodge and get out of harm's way of the sludge villain, and he would eventually lead him to landing one punch on the sludge villain, and the sludge villain would go flying backwards, splattering everywhere into a ton of different pieces. And as this happens, well, one person shows his face jumping through that same manhole cover that the sludge villain did, and that was All Might. All Might would show up and would basically ask how this happened, and Izuku says that the sludge villain attacked him and he was protecting himself. And obviously, that's exactly what occurred. And well, the sludge villain might be, splattered everywhere. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because, Izuku had to do what he had to do. In which All Might would say that he is a brave kid. And honestly, this is a very impressive feat. So he hopes to see him at least trying out for UA High School in the near future. In which Izuku asks if he does really stand a chance, and if he thinks that, he'll be able to get in which All Might says that if he can take down a villain like this, there is no doubt in his mind that he'll have 1000% a chance to get into UA High School. He wishes the kid the best of luck, and he tells him that he'll be seeing him hopefully very soon, in which All Might would pack up the rest of the sludge villain and go jumping off before Izuku could get off another word. In which Izuku would kind of shrug this off a little bit and think that maybe All Might just was extremely busy, and he has a lot of things to do. I mean, he is the number one hero, of course. So he just watches as he jumps off and leaves in the meantime. And this would lead Izuku to feeling as if this was truly his time. Like, he's going to train hard and get ready for the UA entrance exam, but this is his time now. Time to prove that he's a hero. He's gone through the struggle. He's gone through the grind. He's done martial arts. He's done all of these things. And through his constant work ethic, it seems as if he's gained powers that are, well, unworldly. And it seems as if these powers may have come with a bit of a backlash, but it seems as if he's going to continue to grow further and further and further and further. Now, this would lead Izuku into 10 months of training. This would include, studying, of course, but also would include martial arts training, physical training, and so much more. Izuku would continue all of this training to make sure that he is prepared and ready to go no matter what. And on top of that, he wants to be just flat out ready for anything the UA entrance exam could really kind of reveal to him. Not just the practical exam, but also the studying portion or the kind of written portion of the exam. He feels like this is a very important thing or a very important part of the exam that he wants to make sure he's not lacking in. Because if he's lacking in that portion of the exam, I mean, shoot, there's a chance that he could even flat out not get into UA High School because of it. But of course, he makes sure to do his due diligence and make sure to absolutely do everything he needs to do. He studies hard, he trains hard, and all of the above, and this would lead him to the UA entrance exam. Now, the written portion is a very simple portion, and he's kind of, just has to kind of grind his way through it, answer some questions, do some written portions, and so on and so forth, answer, questions to his best of his ability, and he feels he does pretty damn well. I mean, not bad at all, and there's a little bit of struggle here and there, but still, he thinks he did pretty darn well. Now, this would then lead him to the written or the non-written portion, which would be the practical portion of the exam, which we know the practical portion of the exam may be a little less practical because, frankly, the quote-unquote practical portion of the exam is fighting robots. And how practical is it to really fight robots? I mean, robots are kind of, whatever. Like, they're not anything crazy in terms of like villains and stuff like that. They don't really compare, in my opinion. Now, with that said, he does take on he does take on quite a few of these robots, and it's quickly obvious that everybody in this group, everybody who's taking on the robots with him, that he is levels above them, and it's really not even close. Like, he begins to obliterate the robots, absolutely obliterate them, taking them down one by one, maybe even in groups, and it's all through raw strength, just raw strength. And very little technique, really. He just straight up runs through the robot. Like, he just runs at him and runs through him. Yes, of course, in certain scenarios, this wouldn't be the best call. But even Izuku realizes that this isn't your traditional practical exam. This is obviously something that is supposed to show raw strength. And he continues to portray that as he obliterates robot after robot. But then when the 0 Point robot comes affray and begins to show its face, this is a totally different monster, and frankly, a totally different challenge. Izuku stands there, ready to take on the challenge of the 0 Point robot, actually about to jump up and try to land a critical blow to the robot. But as he's about to do this, he could hear kind of a young lady yelp or kind of scream in a way, asking for help, in which this would shock Izuku as he runs toward the yelling, as the girl is basically in the pathway of the robot, and he could make a choice. Do the safe play and just save her, remove the rubble, pick her up, and take her to safety, or make the more flashy play, test his limits, and smash this robot to pieces, and that would solve two problems. But Izuku, in his brain and also his heart, begins to tell him to protect the woman at all costs. Now, he's always respected women. He's always thought of them highly. He's always been a good person overall, but he's never felt like this before. And it's not because of who she is by any means. It's because something otherworldly is telling him to make sure that she's safe, in which he doesn't know what it is, but he immediately would clear the rubble, grab her, and dash off, putting her down and also bringing her to safety, flat out just, clearing the area so that no one is actually hurt. Now, he's never felt this way about a male person. I mean, he saw right now a couple male characters or a couple male people actually kind of getting hurt or, maybe needing help overall, but this is the first person, and it was a female, that he felt that really and truly needed help. Maybe it has something to do with the strength that he has, the powers. He doesn't know, but it is something that he's never really felt before, and he really feels as if things continue to stack on top of each other. I mean, his thirst for blood, that was a totally different thing that he's never felt before, and he got stacked on top of it. It seems as if it continues to stack more and more, or things continue to get revealed more and more as things go on. But luckily enough, things, are about to end for the UA entrance exam, and Izuku has saved quite a few people, at least has saved people to a large extent, or saved her, and also helped out where he could. Now, this is what he doesn't know, is that this is going to give him quite a few extra points. And when I mean quite a few, I mean quite a few. And he's kind of just, flat out ready to expand even further on his hero journey. And that is going to be grateful, or he's going to be very, very grateful that he did all of those things, because he's going to have massive advantages because of it. And those massive advantages, that's because of one thing only, and that's really doing well in the entrance exam. Because when he gets his letter and that hologram pops up and he sees All Might himself, and All Might would tell him that he scored number 1 in all of UA, and he is the number 1 student in class 1A and in the first years, this would make him realize that all his hard work, all his grinding, everything that he put himself through was all worth it. But quickly he would realize that he's going to have to deal with a lot of different personalities, you could say, in UA High School. And it all starts on the very first day with Shota Aizawa, other known as Eraserhead. Eraserhead would show him and everyone else that he is not messing around, not even one bit. He would tell everybody that everybody needs to focus, everyone needs to lock in, and everyone needs to basically just focus on this one thing, and that is being the best hero possible. Hands down, best hero possible. In which, of course, this is when Izuku hears him say this. He knows that this is the place for him. But Izuku was pretty damn surprised when Aizawa decided to basically ignore the schedule and just flat out be like, oh yeah, by the way, no schedule, I'm not listening to it. We are just going straight into an assessment where I'm going to assess everything about your powers and blah, blah, blah. And that's exactly what he does. And Izuku is shocked by this, but I mean, we know Izuku, he's pretty happy about it. Izuku loves to train, loves to work hard, and loves to just push himself to the absolute limit. We know Izuku loves to do stuff like that. So the fact that we have a quirk assessment this early on, and something that would allow Izuku to show off his skills and stuff like that, Izuku loves that idea, loves the idea of doing just that. So he's going to obviously oblige and show off his skills from how far he can throw a ball, which is extremely far, by the way. And on top of that, just show how fast, or show off his speed, his sidestep skills, his grip strength, and his strength overall. I mean, he gets number one in almost every single category, and he's just showing off at this point, showing everybody what he's capable of, and frankly, what they're going to have to deal with in terms of competition, because that's what this is. This is a competition. Everybody is standing here thinking that, well, oh, yeah, I mean, everyone's kind of, working together and this is fun and stuff like that. No. Even Aizawa makes this very clear that this is no normal thing. This is a competition. At the end of the day, there's rankings for heroes for a reason. There is a number one hero. His name is All Might. There is a number two. That is Endeavor, and it goes down the list, and it keeps going down the list over and over and over again. These are the people that you're going to have to deal with. These are the people that are going to be your competition, and the people that are here standing next to you. Aizawa even tells them they are your competition to be the very best hero you could possibly be. But there's a standard to uphold, a standard that every single person here is going to have to understand thoroughly, from page in and page out, from up to down to everything, every last bit of it. But the rankings, well, let's just say that will tell you a lot. But it won't tell you the whole story. So you have to reach the maximum you possibly can, and then take that maximum and increase it by 5-6 times, because then that's where you need to be if you want to be the best hero alive. And he tells them all that he knows that a lot of people want to be like All Might. A lot of people want to be the one and the only number one hero. But guess what? There is no All Might. There is no gold standard. There is no number one that you can hold on to. You can't be like All Might. But what you can be is the maximum potential of yourself. And he's telling them that he doesn't think, that any of them can be as good as All Might. Not even close. But, as always, maybe someone should prove him wrong. And then they'll talk about it when, they're at the podium accepting their number one hero speech, in which he would scoff a little bit at this, but then tell them all that if they all want to go to orientation still, that they better hurry up, because they might be able to catch the last half of it, in which he would dismiss his class and he would watch as all of them would scramble, but one person would walk by slowly. One person who could care less about orientation, who could care less about any of this, any of what's happening. It's as if everything has always been just this. Everything has always been hero, and be as strong as possible. That person walking by Aizawa is Izuku Midoriya, the person that truly believes that he will not only take the reins of number one hero, but he will also be even greater than All Might. Izuku would walk by Aizawa, and Aizawa would slightly smirk, thinking that this kid right here may be the next coming of All Might, or at least to the extent of power, strength. But truly, what makes All Might is something that they're going to need to learn quicker than you could possibly imagine. But for now, that is the end of What If Deku Was Like Akaza Part 1. Izuku Midoriya has now basically shown what he's capable of. Has shown what everyone else basically lacks. Izuku's strength, his speed, and his overarching power is levels above everyone else's. And he continues to show that time in and time out. And during this quirk assessment, or during the quirk assessment that happened, he showed exactly why he was the number one student at UA High School. And with the idea of being the number one student, well, there comes with a lot of jealousy. A lot of students are pretty jealous, but one more specifically, Katsuki Bakugo, is extremely jealous. Because Izuku, well, he's always been better than him. And at least that's what it seems like, and that's what it feels like. And Izuku is going to show everyone why he truly is better than Bakugo, especially when it comes to this first training session that they're going to have with the number one hero, All Might. Izuku and many others are prepared as All Might would storm into the room, and All Might would give his signature, "I am here." All Might would, of course, tell them that they're going to be doing some heroes versus villains training and to prepare themselves, because this right here is going to be their first chance to show what they can do against other people. So now they're going to take on each other. All Might tells them all to get on their hero outfits or hero suits and get ready for a battle, that would be different than any of them would ever expect, because they're going to be doing a mix of battling but also strategy. It seems as if they're going to have to deal with actually seizing a bomb or defending it, and that's exactly what's going to have to happen. Now, this is the explanation in itself. All Might would stand there speaking with everybody, telling them that there's going to be a hero team and a villain team. The villain team will defend the bomb. The hero team will try to seize the bomb. Now, villains are allowed to capture the heroes or defeat them in turn, which would allow them to win. Now, if they defend the bomb for longer than 5 minutes, then they will win as well. The hero team, on the other hand, just needs to touch the bomb, or they could also capture both of the villains and then touch the bomb. But it all ends with basically touching the bomb to quote-unquote defuse it. Now, the first team up would be Izuku Midoriya and also Ochaku Uraka versus Tenya Ida and Katsuki Bakugo. Now, this is where things kind of go off the rails, because Katsuki Bakugo, he's a hothead. He has some temper, and he decides that he doesn't want to necessarily play by the rules. He doesn't want to necessarily do the exercise. What he decides to do is he decides that he wants to fight. So when the 5 minutes of planning are up and Izuku Midoriya and Ochaku Uraka enter the area or enter the building, immediately Bakugo would come spiraling down. Bakugo would come out of nowhere, blasting Izuku in the face, but Izuku is able to brush it off, grabbing Katsuki Bakugo right on the face and slamming him to the ground and dragging him through the floor or the pavement. He immediately tells Ochaku to start heading upstairs and locate where the bomb is located at, and he continues to fight Bakugo. Bakugo tells him that he's gonna prove why he should be the number one student and why he's so much better than Izuku. But Izuku reminds him that if he was better than him, then he would have scored better than him as well. So it's pretty obvious where they stand in terms of skill and who is currently and truly better than each other. Now, Bakugo is still under the idea that, Izuku doesn't even have a quirk. he thinks to himself, well, this kid doesn't have a quirk. I should never be losing to him. But the thing is Izuku might not have a traditional quirk and a quirk that can't be analyzed by a doctor, but he still has insane amounts of powers. And you should never count out the ability of someone like Izuku Midoriya. Not only does Bakugo not stand a chance in terms of power, Izuku has the massive martial arts gap of experience. Izuku's experience in martial arts is off the charts. I mean, when I mean off the charts, I mean off the charts. His experience with martial arts is nothing to be played with, and his experience overall just is insane. Izuku is a lethal martial artist, experienced in almost every single martial arts you could possibly think of, so there's really no chance that Bakugo stands in this regard. And he easily defeats Bakugo and makes it look very, very simple. And he makes Bakugo look like a chump. And it's crazy because the bully persona of Bakugo, that's not a very good thing to have, especially because Bakugo himself, I mean, he shows that he's like, this bully, or that he's this or that, and he's super strong. And don't get me wrong, he is pretty damn strong. But the level that Izuku is portraying at this moment, it's really not even close. Like, genuinely not even close. Now, with that said, Izuku, of course, defeats Bakugo, and this leads to him traveling up the staircase and seeing where Ochako went. Once he finds Ochako, they're basically able to basically seize Tenya Ida very quickly and also seize the bomb. And this was a very simple thing for him to do, and he might have even been able to do it quicker than he possibly could have imagined, but he didn't know for sure if he truly had such a massive advantage on someone like Bakugo. But obviously, he did. Now, this would lead to them, well, obviously winning, and Izuku would be simple enough as winning this event, or winning this training session with Ochako, and everybody is pretty damn impressed about what he was able to do, and pretty damn impressed how he was able to do it at the end of the day. And frankly, that's just the truth of it, right? Izuku was just flat out better, and was flat out just in a better position, and also just more skilled and powerful than Bakugo ever was at this moment, and he was able to easily defeat them even if there was no other stipulation. Now, this would lead them into watching some of the other people fight and other people do their thing, but of course this was kind of a filler-like thing, and Izuku would just watch it and kind of analyze what his other classmates can do and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was nothing crazy. It was pretty simple, you could say. And this would lead Izuku into more or less going on to the very next day, and everybody is just upwardly impressed with Izuku at this point, and just makes it's pretty well known that, like, Izuku is just, at another level at this moment. And everyone thinks to themselves that there probably is nobody that could even stand up to Izuku at this point, which would include someone like Todoroki, even though Todoroki was pretty impressive in his little thing as well. But still, it doesn't really seem like he's too, he's too impressive in terms of a comparison with Izuku Midoriya. And this would lead them to doing their very next little training session, you could call it, and that would be with going to the USJ and with Hero 13. Now, they would head over there, and Aizawa would tell them very, very quickly that they have to be on their best behavior, that they're going to get a lot from this, and so on and so forth. And they all believe that to be the case. But what's really weird is that when it all comes to a head, you could even say, when they're all there, when they're all waiting and they're all getting ready, it seems as if this place, or, this place in general, is a little bit different than what they really expected. Because they thought, like rescue training, hero training, oh yeah, that sounds really fun. And they never expected there to be, villains, like fake villains. That's awesome, right? That's insane. And Kirishima, who's also there, begins to even bring this up, like, oh yeah, this is pretty crazy. Like, what is this? Like, fake villains? Like, how much money did this cost you guys? But Aizawa would immediately jump into action, saying those are not fake villains, those villains are real. In which this would shock the students and many others, but not before they can even react, because portals would open up, and immediately, like out of what seems to be out of nowhere, well, it seems as if they're immediately taken away by portals into different areas. Izuku being dropped into a lake, but being able to jump out of the lake to a nearby boat pretty damn quickly. And he would soon see that there's two people with him, one by the name of Asui and one by the name of Mineta, in which Izuku, in all honesty, is kind of annoyed by this because, not because of Asui, but more because of Mineta, because Mineta is kind of a weird person, and Izuku doesn't really like the idea of somebody disrespecting women. And frankly, that's exactly what Mineta does. And then he even goes to basically disrespect Asui to a large extent, so he smacks the heck out of him and makes sure that he knows and understands to never do that again, and he's dead serious about it. In which immediately Mineta is terrified of this, because, I mean, Izuku's worried about something like this when there's literal villains trying to kill them. In which, I mean, Izuku is going to be worried about that no matter what, you know what I mean? Like, that is the type of person he is. And he doesn't care. Like, he does care that the villains are trying to kill them and all that, but he also cares about, you know, keeping like a proper mentality and making sure that everyone is still upholding good morals, you could even say, to a large extent. Now, this would lead them to being threatened by a bunch of villains that are within the lake of some sort. But of course, this would be an easy out. They would easily be able to leave because Izuku's strength and also Asui's strength would allow them to leap out and kind of just jump away for the most part. And it wouldn't be too hard of a thing to actually just leave flat out, which is pretty good because now they don't have to worry about, you know, straight up being stuck there or dying and stuff like that. And when the other villains try to stop them, Izuku just knocks them out extremely fast. Now, Izuku's at the point where he just wants to get Asui and also Mineta out of here, even though Mineta does annoy the hell out of him and he kind of wants him to, you know, go croak to a certain extent. But he does want to get Asui out of here, so he makes sure to get them to a safe distance before he converges to actually help Aizawa with a bit of a giant problem. Because that giant problem would be the Nomu. Now, Aizawa does defeat all the other villains, and he defeats them pretty damn easily. Like, it's not really a hard task for Aizawa, right? But at the same time, he has to now deal with a Nomu, a superpowered being that is created to kill All Might. And let's just say Izuku knows that it's never that simple. Like, there is just no way that, well, Aizawa is going to be able to take down a monstrous being like this. Shoot, he doesn't even know if he's going to be able and willing and also effective enough to actually take down someone like the Nomu himself. But he's going to give it his all, and he's going to absolutely leave everything out there on the line to make sure that he can at least attempt to do so. Now, with this attempt, of course, there would be a mild amount of controversy just because obviously he doesn't, or Aizawa doesn't, want Izuku being involved or any other student involved. But luckily he did, because soon Aizawa would realize very quickly that he definitely needed some help. Because the Nomu would try and fight him, or the Nomu would come charging in non-stop and would not be able to be halted, especially by Aizawa's quirk. And luckily enough, someone is able to jump in front of Izuku, or someone's ready to jump in front of Aizawa, being that of Izuku. Izuku jumps in front of the Nomu and basically hip tosses the Nomu to the side, slamming him on the ground, using the momentum of the Nomu against him. But he could tell that the Nomu is strong. So when he starts to throw hands with the Nomu, he needs to be very, very careful. He begins to kind of like, you know, judge his distance and try to properly fight him. But he even knows to a large extent that it's not going to be that simple. Because at the end of the day, the Nomu's a freaking issue, and he's not having the best of time, at least against the Nomu for the most part. And it's just because he's so durable, but luckily enough, Izuku seems to be able to whittle him down slowly but surely, or at least stall him out to a large extent. And eventually, the Nomu would be slowing down just a smidge. Because, well, let's just be honest, Izuku's extremely strong. Not at his peak strength, but he is extremely, extremely powerful. Now, this would lead to basically a large stall. And this would lead to, well, the one and only All Might eventually arriving. But as All Might arrives, it seems like Izuku is caught off guard just minorly. And when he's caught off guard just a smidge, just a tiny little bit, well, the Nomu gets a hold of him. And let's just say the Nomu does some serious damage to Izuku. The Nomu would proceed to grab Izuku by the arms and would pull them off. Yes, pull them off. And Izuku would feel this adrenaline rushing through his body, and he would scream. And All Might would come in as if he's like, you know, like completely angry. And in a blaze of glory, All Might begins to go blow for blow with the Nomu, but actually not holding back, not even one singular bit, landing punch after punch, obliterating the Nomu as fast as possible. He can't allow one of his students to be maimed like that. He was late, and it was all his fault. It was because it was his fault that Izuku is this injured. It's his fault that this happened. And that's the way All Might feels right now, is that it was flat out his fault that all of this occurred. And to be honest, to a large extent, it kind of was. I mean, if All Might just, you know, focused more on his teaching role, this wouldn't have occurred. But here's the thing, while they're fighting, it seems as if Izuku Midoriya is standing back up. The bleeding seemingly has stopped, and he is standing up, and he is staring back at the Nomu. Everybody in complete and utter shock, from crying faces to people in complete and utter just disbelief. Is Izuku okay? What's going on? What happened with him? What is he going to? And as they're thinking about the idea of what is he going to do, Izuku's eyes would stare right at the ceiling, and let's just say his hands would then reappear, growing out of his body once again as he reaches to the top of the ceiling in some sort of way, and he looks at his arms and looks at his hands, and he realizes that he is so much more than just a normal person, normal guy, normal man. He has grown his limbs back, and this is just another layer of powers he knew nothing about. Immediately, he would jump back into action, and his durability would have spiked immensely. It's as if his body is now regenerating constantly. And he jumps into action, fighting with the Nomu once again, and it seems like he's holding an even greater advantage against the Nomu now. Like, it is really transparent how strong Izuku is now, and it seems as if that little bit of damage, that little occurrence of what just happened with him getting his arms torn off, just awakened an even greater power within him as he lands blows to the Nomu and gets behind the Nomu, grabbing both of the Nomu's arms and says, "Let's see how you like it when it happens to you," pulling the Nomu so far backwards that his arms begin to crack and then his arms pull off. Yes, Izuku was able to do so, as All Might would then clash with the Nomu again, landing a beautiful Detroit smash as he smashes the Nomu out of the USJ. Immediately, Shigaraki and also Kurogiri would try and basically just run away. I mean, they would flat out be terrified at the idea that this kid, this guy, was able to do the thing he was able to do. I mean, did they not just all see that? That was crazy. How was he able to do that? And immediately they flee. They just leave the scene. But they think that, frankly, what they just saw was very villainous. Now, it might sound weird, but they're thinking to themselves that this kid, he might have a little villain in him after all, and that might be beneficial to the League of Villains before you could possibly even know it. But, of course, for now, they're going to have to just run away, because it's not like they have a choice in the matter. I mean, literally, if they stayed, they would have flat out just died. Now, this would lead them to, of course, basically, taking off, and then Izuku and also all the other students would get a little bit of time off, and All Might would even talk to Izuku about what happened, about what occurred, and that he really should kind of be careful with how brutal he is, in which Izuku responds to him saying that he had to do what he had to do, but also that thing was not a person. That was not a man. That was a monster, and it was something that needed to be put down. And frankly, launching him out of the USJ was probably the nice way to go about things, because honestly, that thing should have died. That thing should have been put in the ground, and that's what Izuku truly believes. And All Might, even to an extent, kind of thinks to himself that maybe the kid is right. Like, that thing wasn't a human being anymore, if it ever was a human being in the first place. But that thing was far from a human being, and he's kind of right. The thing needed to be put down for good. But at the end of the day, I mean, heroes don't necessarily make that choice in this regard, or shouldn't have to make that choice, but sometimes beings aren't worth saving, and even Izuku, and maybe even to an extent All Might, understands that to an extent. Now, this would lead Izuku into actually going off and doing the next kind of event, quote unquote, which would be the UA Sports Festival. But here's the thing. And quickly after this, they would actually realize that there was another drawback to Izuku gaining this massive regeneration. It's that he can't be out in the sun. The guy walks out into the sun and starts burning up, and his skin starts burning to a crisp and melting, hurting him extremely bad. Now, of course, Izuku can kind of get around this, and there is some training to be had so that he could get around this. But for now, I mean, he flat out cannot go out in the sun. So unfortunately, the #1 student of UA is going to have to take a bit of a sideline until he can up-tune his tolerance to the sun. And that's exactly what he's going to do over the course of all of this time leading up until their internships. Izuku, instead of being part of the UA Sports Festival and all of those things, he has to try and tune back the kind of like horrible feeling that he gets when he gets scorched by the sun. So they do kind of like, minor exposure, and then also kind of testing with his body what they need to do, and so on and so forth. And eventually they find out exactly what needs to happen, and the support class is able to more or less help him with that as well. And they give him some sort of like a sun cream kind of, or sunscreen, or a cream that allows him to kind of be okay in the sun, but it more specifically helps with his tolerance. So over time, while this time is happening, over a couple weeks, he is able to build up this tolerance to where it's not that bad. But to be honest, he still has massive restrictions, and throughout his time at UA, in general, like his literal time throughout UA in general, he's gonna have to build this tolerance more and more. But for now, he can kind of be out in the sun for a couple hours, maybe 3-4 hours, but like he literally can't be out in the sun for a long period of time, or serious damage is going to be made. But luckily enough, there's a lot of people that heard about Izuku before all of this occurred, and there is somebody in the internships, actually quite a few people, that are very interested in working with someone like Izuku Midoriya, and maybe there's somebody that wants to work with him for her own selfish reasons. Because, well, there is a hero, the rabbit hero Mirako, who is looking for a challenge and a fight and a sparring partner, and frankly, Izuku Midoriya, the prodigy martial artist, kind of fits the mold perfectly. So how could he turn down an offer from someone and one of the top heroes in the entirety of Japan, and arguably one of the strongest heroes in the entirety of Japan? Well, you can't. You can't turn it down and you can't deny it, so he doesn't deny it. So he accepts a internship with Mirko, and this would lead him on another journey with learning more about martial arts, learning more about fighting styles, and also gaining in strength himself. But for now, that is where we're going to end part 2 of What If Deku Was Like Akaza. Izuku Midoriya has now finally started his internship. And his internship is going to be with the one and only Mirko. Now, Mirko is something interesting, because initially Izuku didn't really know much about her, and frankly, she's not like any other female you could possibly think of. Now, normally he's very protective. You know, he doesn't really like the idea of women getting injured and getting hurt, and he's very protective and proper over women. Now this is all true, but he also now has run into a woman that is a little bit interesting, you could say. And it's not interesting, or not a bad interesting or anything like that, but she is interesting in the way of, well, she's very, very, very powerful. So much so that she's kind of frightening. Just a little bit frightening. Now, Izuku would see this as pretty interesting overall, but would also utilize this time with Mirko and the training with Mirko as a way to sharpen his own skills. And that's exactly what he does. He sharpens his own skills, and he finds ways to benefit himself. He continues to get stronger, and all of the above. Now, the training with Mirko has really elevated his fight style, and has really shown him the type of fight style that he really could approach things with, and he continues to just get more and more powerful through this brand new fight style, and it's a pretty interesting one. I mean, this one that he now utilizes is more of a athletic one, more of a one that can use mostly kicks and stuff like that, and he continues to utilize it for the benefit of obviously himself. And also, just training with Mirko is a totally different feeling. I mean, he can feel his body getting a lot more durable as well, because at the end of the day, she hits pretty damn hard. I mean, it's no joke, the punishment that he has to take when fighting and actually training with Mirko. Now, this would lead them to actually going off on a bit of an excursion, you could say, and they decide to head off to Hosu City. Now, what they didn't know was that Hosu City was going to be riddled, and I'm saying riddled with, well, villains. Now, this is kind of an awkward occurrence because they thought it would be a simple incursion, kind of like a simple thing to actually occur. And they thought, yeah, there might be a couple villains here and there, but nothing crazy, right? There's no way that there was going to be tons and tons of villains, but they were wrong. There was going to be Nomus, there was going to be villains, there was going to be a hero killer, all of these things. And he has to deal with them all, including Mirko. And yes, having Mirko here, well, it makes it a little bit easier, but it's still difficult, right? It's still a lot to deal with overall. And this all was just really made for a distraction to actually speak with Izuku. Now, this may sound odd, but Shigaraki sees Izuku as someone who might be able to actually become and shift over into villainy, but you never know, right? Like, this was a good idea for Shigaraki as long as he, doesn't die, because that would absolutely suck. Because if he just runs into an issue and ends up, croaking, that would not be beneficial. But he does finally get to meet up with Izuku Midoriya, and he speaks with him, offering him so many different things, offering him this, offering that, offering him power, and also just flat out anything he ever wanted. And Izuku would eventually get the idea of kind of siding with them. But there's a reason for that. In his own mind, he wants to make it or portray that he is kind of on the side of Shigaraki, or at least some sort of sided on Shigaraki. Like, he's somewhat on their side, or at least considering joining their side. So once he starts kind of convincing Shigaraki of this, Mirko would approach and actually immediately start a fight with Shigaraki. Now, this would kind of, put them in an awkward position because Izuku had a plan that he wanted to kind of set up Shigaraki for, but unfortunately, Mirko showed up at kind of not the best time in the world, but still, it's not horrible. So he decides to try to drop hints toward Mirko of what he's trying to do. And luckily enough, he's able to somewhat do this. It's not perfect, but throughout this fight and throughout this kind of giant facade that they're putting up, he's basically able to tell Mirko exactly what he wants to do and the seeds that he's planted within Shigaraki's mind, leading to actually him telling Mirko to put him down, like drop him with like a massive kick to the face and knock him out, quote unquote, in which Mirko would land this kick, knocking Izuku out, quote unquote, but not actually knocking him out, and she would immediately dash towards Shigaraki, but a portal would open up and take him away. Immediately, Mirko would pick him up, or pick Akaza, or this version of Deku up, and she would jump away. And immediately, Izuku would wake up and would tell her that now the seeds have been planted, as if he's going to flip sides. Mirko would kind of smirk and laugh at this, saying that he's smarter than she actually thought, but it was a very risky thing to do. But Izuku says that he could tell that this Shigaraki guy, can truly be a massive issue in the near future if they're not careful. In which Mirko asks, how does he know that? And he tells her that he can just sense things. He can tell by kind of like, not necessarily the aura of somebody, but just the type of kind of feeling that they give off to an extent. And he could tell that Shigaraki may become a massive issue, but so he wants a way, and also a way to basically assert himself within that, if he can find a way to stop him entirely. And as his power and his strength and speed continues to grow, an insider, or basically a way to get inside of the League of Villains, is something that he really, really wants. And maybe it would lead them astray a little bit, thinking that they now have someone like Izuku who is considering going into basically villainy. Now, this just planted a seed, though. This wasn't like a full-on turn or anything like that. They're still going to make their attempts to try and grab or take Izuku, but this would only benefit Izuku heavily in the long run. But also, they are looking at someone else, Katsuki Bakugo, and trying to get him to turn as well, seeing that he has some anger problems, and definitely some aspects of him are very villainous. They think that they might be able to flip him to a different side. But now, this would lead to Izuku and all the other UA students being forced to actually cut short their internships, and they would have to head back to UA High School. Now, when they head back to UA High School, this is where things kind of shift back more into the school-orientated or school aspect of everything, right? Immediately, they would go into kind of this study mode where they would be getting ready for the final exams. And the final exams would be pretty basic. You have your written and you have your practical. Just like you had the UA entrance exam, it's very similar to that specifically. Now, this would lead to more or less Izuku studying as hard as he possibly can and doing not the practical, but the written portion of the exam. And then obviously this would eventually lead them down the pathway of the practical. But the practical is not going to be robots. The practical is not going to be your normal, your normal thing that most people thought it was going to be. And it's actually going to be something a little bit different. It's going to be students versus teachers. Now, Izuku is curious about basically who he's going to be going against. But before he could even really think about that, he is called in with Aizawa and many others to talk about some things that he did while on the internship. It seems like Mirko actually told UA about this on the off chance that Izuku was lying. But Izuku makes it very clear that if they feel that he's, turned or something like that, I mean, feel free to do a full investigation. But he did that with full certainty to make sure he can set up or actually put the League of Villains in a bad spot. And from the very beginning, he knew that they were interested in him, especially with some of the tendencies that he was portraying. So they really thought that, oh, well, maybe they can flip him, maybe they can turn him. So of course that's what they were thinking, and of course that's kind of like the idea that they thought would be, okay, and they would be able to do that. But he makes it very clear that he has no intention of flipping, that he has no intention of doing any of those things, that he's not going to flip sides or anything like that, but just know that there is a chance for them to truly shut down this whole organization if they utilize him, in which they're all kind of surprised by the fact that he's really thought this far ahead. I mean, this is kind of a crazy way to approach things, but still Izuku shrugs it off and says, like, this is something that they really should be thinking about, because you never know, right? You never know when you're going to be given an opportunity to shut down something like this, in which obviously they would kind of go along with what Izuku and also what they're flat out talking about in general. So they would go on to do, your normal practical exam, and obviously that practical exam would be kind of along the lines of more or less your heroes, or your adult heroes versus your students. Now, this would lead to Izuku and also Bakugo being teamed up. Now, Bakugo doesn't like the idea of teaming up with Izuku, like not even close, like he does not like it at all. But of course, Izuku makes it very, very clear that he is trying to just pass the exam, and that's it. They don't got to get along, they don't got to team up properly, whatever. He just wants to pass the exam, and it's that simple. In which at least they could agree on that, leading to Bakugo and Izuku taking on All Might. Now, flat out, Bakugo does not stand a chance against someone like All Might. But Izuku, the one that has basically been climbing in strength this entire time and continues to get stronger and stronger, truly has a chance against All Might, especially with his massive amount of regeneration. When he takes on All Might, it's a pretty crazy fight. He takes on All Might straight up right in front of him, just going blow for blow, and it seems like Izuku's not even really taking damage, but All Might slowly but surely is. It seems as if Izuku's stamina is also holding up drastically as well, almost as if he has infinite stamina. And this is kind of a crazy thing, and many others are watching this and they're completely taken back by this. Like, how is this even possible? How is he able to keep up with All Might the way he's keeping up with All Might? Like, this makes no sense. Like, this shouldn't be something that can actually be happening. But of course, well, it is happening. And Izuku is showing why his level of strength is continuously growing and growing and growing. And he's able to just take on All Might one-on-one, while Bakugo plays more of a support role. And not gonna lie, let's just say this, Bakugo is not too happy about the idea of playing more of a support role, but they still are able to actually take down All Might enough to the point where they're able to escape through the gates. But honestly, Izuku could have kept fighting and actually won this fight right here. And to be honest, there was part of him that was itching, like legitimately itching to continue this fight. Part of him really wanted to continue fighting, but it was as if something in the back of his mind, like, another thing was kind of telling him, okay, like, it's time to chill out, it's time to not do this anymore, which, is fair, because, you gotta really be careful with how much you fight, and also how much damage you're going to take. But he honestly thought that he could have taken down All Might here, and maybe in this reality, he probably could have. There's a good chance that he actually could have taken down All Might, but we didn't really get to see the finale of that fight, so I guess we just don't know for now. Now, this would lead to Izuku more or less passing the exam, and that also includes Bakugo. They would both pass the exam very easily, and it would be pretty just flat out impressive how well they were able to do, right? Everyone's like, wow, I mean, they took on literally the #1 hero and they did that good. Like, that seems kind of insane Like, how were they able to do such a thing? Like, how were they able to actually do that? Which is kind of wild when you think about it. But at the same time, it seems as if they're both prepared to kind of go on to the very next thing, which would obviously be the forest training camp. Now, the forest training camp is pretty much gonna go very, very similar to normal, which the forest training camp is just a way for them to get stronger, a way for them to, train harder, in which this allows Izuku to actually train his sunlight deficiency or his weakness to sunlight, which is something that he's really excited to do because, yes, it is a bit of a pain because, let's be honest, like, it's gonna hurt like hell, but at the same time, it's going to benefit him massively. The fact that he's able to actually kind of level up in this way, and the fact that he's going to be able to more or less kind of get to the point where sunlight no longer affects him the way that it kind of would have initially, is something that's going to benefit him massively in the near future. And like I said, the forest training camp would go very similar, if not exactly the same, and that includes villains showing up to actually fight. But this time around, they're not here for just, Bakugo. They are actually here for Izuku as well. At the end of the day, they know that Izuku's strength is absolutely insane. They know that basically they could get so much out of having Izuku and Bakugo, because Bakugo also kind of has this weird, anger to him and stuff like that. So they honestly believe that they could bring Bakugo over to that darker side of him and actually utilize him in the near future. Now, will that actually happen? Probably not. But Izuku and Bakugo are the targets of this invasion, and quickly they would actually realize that, that would be the case. But before that, let's just say Mr. Izuku Midoriya absolutely puts the beating on one basically muscle head, in which would be Muscular, and he puts the beating on Muscular. He does serious damage to Muscular, and he does some serious work in terms of actually defeating him. And on top of that, he makes sure that Muscular knows and understands that he's never going to be doing this ever again, because, at the end of the day, he was trying to literally kill a child. He was trying to hurt a child extremely bad, and this was a no for Izuku, obviously. And Izuku makes sure that this guy gets the beating he deserves, and after defeating him, of course, he's able to kind of go on to basically doing the very next thing, which would be finding where Bakugo currently is. Now, they're not 100% sure where Bakugo currently is, because Bakugo could be kind of anywhere at this point, but at the same time, they're able to eventually find Bakugo, and the League of Villains finds Bakugo, but also the League of Villains would be kind of in the perfect place at the right time to actually find Izuku. Now, you got to keep in mind, the League of Villains also kind of minorly believes that Izuku wants to flip sides to a large extent. And Izuku wants this to be the case 1000%, or at least wants them to think this to be the case 1000%. So he decides that he's going to basically bait them in. Yes, they're here to basically capture Bakugo. But as they're capturing Bakugo, as they're getting Bakugo and bringing him in and dragging him through the portal, Izuku would dive in as well, following Bakugo or following right behind him. Now, everyone is ready to actually fight Izuku in terms of the League of Villains, but then when Izuku's not fighting or anything and they just captured Bakugo, they truly believe that he is on their side. That's until they realize very quickly that that's really not the case. He awaits Bakugo basically getting ready for his kind of way of getting out. So Bakugo would stand there or be locked up and then eventually let free, and he would spark an explosion at Shigaraki's face and would kind of stream explosions on everyone else as well. This would lead to basically Izuku being right there to stop Bakugo if need be, in which Izuku would stand there as if like, oh yeah, like I'm going to stop him. I'm going to, basically shut this down right now. And everybody in the League of Villains would think, oh, Izuku's going to help us. But quickly, that's not the case. Izuku would swiftly knock out the rest of the villains, including someone like Shigaraki. And Bakugo would smirk, saying that he already knew that the damn nerd, there was no way he would have turned sides. I mean, it was ridiculous to even think that that was the case. But this might get him in some hot water pretty soon. In which Izuku does agree that this may get him in some hot water, pretending to be a villain, but that's kind of not their concern. Izuku and Bakugo would blow open the building, or at least the side of the wall, to drag all the villains out, signaling for the other heroes. This would lead to the capture of basically all of the villains in the League of Villains outside of, well, the one and only All For One. And as kind of like a pseudo final gambit, All For One knows that he needs to basically save Shigaraki or basically get him out of there. So he tries to do that with a portal, but let's be honest, well, Akaza, or this version of Izuku, is ready for it. I mean, so fast to the point where he can stop this Shigaraki from being dragged into a portal, forcing the one and only All For One to show his face, to actually leading him to fighting Bakugo and also Izuku Midoriya. But of course, with him showing his face, well, with All For One comes All Might himself. So now All Might being there with no League of Villains no longer a threat, and only there being an All For One, this is something that is immensely different now. This is something that could change things forever. Because at the end of the day, with League of Villains captured and there only being All For One, well, now there's a fight between All Might, Akaza, or All Might Izuku, or this version of Izuku being like Akaza, and Bakugo versus All For One. And this fight is one that heavily favors the heroes, in a fight that could actually stop so many things from happening in this world, and well, more or less happening within Japan. But this fight is the true end of possibly All For One and the League of Villains themselves. With only All For One left, and with Shigaraki's kind of future in the balance, it seems as if All Might Izuku and also Bakugo are the last people ready and standing to take him down. But what will happen to All For One? How will the capture of All For One go? And what's going to happen to Japan after all of this is said and done? Well, you're going to have to find out in part 4 of What If Deku Was Like Akaza. Izuku Midoriya, All Might, and Katsuki Bakugo take on All For One live broadcasting to Japan. Now, this fight, in kind of an overarching idea, is not a very close one. All Might himself was able to defeat All For One in a different world, but now with the assistance of someone like Izuku Midoriya and also a little bit of assistance from Bakugo, it seems like everything is stacked up against All For One pretty heavily. But the only trick that All For One has up his sleeve is basically his only opening would be trying to end Bakugo or have somebody save him. Now, he would look for this opening, shooting black tendrils at Bakugo, but that opening would not be enough for him to actually defeat or kill somebody on the hero side of the floor. But there's something, at least something very, very deep in his bag of tricks that he knows that may or may not come to fruition, well, in a little bit. And he knows that even if he goes to prison right here and right now, maybe, just maybe, his ideals and his ideas will carry on sooner than you could possibly imagine. Now, All For One would be defeated with a United States of Smash, and also Izuku Midoriya following up with his own solid punch to All For One as well. they would land a critical blow, knocking out All For One. This knockout would basically lead them into a little bit more peaceful time, especially with Shigaraki and many of the other League of Villains captured already, and All For One captured as well. Something that hasn't really been done in a little bit. They have now officially granted peacetime, at least from All For One himself. There are some other people out there that they're going to have to deal with, but for now, this is a pretty good start, you could say. Now, this would lead us into a completely different time, where we are starting this transition into UA's finest, basically Class 1 students trying to get their provisional hero license. Now, we do deal with a little bit of a different kind of event where they kind of train all together, work on their super moves, and just flat out try to train to get stronger and stronger. But it seems like when they head to the provisional hero licensing exam, that there's somebody watching that nobody really knows much about, or at least there is some sort of a spy that is currently within everything. But they don't know much about this person. It's some random person. They have no clue what they're doing there. And Izuku just goes about his provisional hero license exactly how you would have in the very beginning. Now, Izuku's first event, or the first event for the provisional hero license, would be a basic one. You're basically going to tag people with dodgeballs or something like that, knocking them out with when you tap on their lights that are on their suits, kind of like a dodgeball laser tag. And it would be a pretty basic idea, and Izuku's speed, strength, and agility would flat out just benefit him so much to the point where it would be a pretty easy thing for him to get done. I mean, it wouldn't be hard by any means. Like, it would be a very basic and easy thing that Izuku would go through, and he would just be able to defeat them, or at least knock them out of the match kind of thing, and qualify himself to the next round quicker than you could possibly imagine. Now, the next part would be actually something interesting, being that the next part is something involving, well, you know, a regular kind of situation as a hero, and it would be more of a rescue-like training type of situation. Now, this situation is something that is a little bit unknown to Izuku, and Izuku doesn't really know his way really around saving other people the way that maybe he could have known or should know. But for the most part, Izuku just helps out where he can, lifting heavy objects, you know, saving those who maybe are on like a cliffside where he can easily scale up and save them, and so on. So he makes sure that he does the basic things he knows he can't get wrong, but also kind of just helps out overall where he can, and he's able to get through this. Now, the real test, and the real test that would make Izuku extremely excited, would be the invasion of villains. Now, this is actually a test and not, you know, the normal whole actual villain invasion. That's not what this is for the most part. This is actually just a test. And there is some PTSD, I will say that, with Class 1A, because Class 1A is probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is just like the USJ, like this is all bad, blah, blah, blah. No. But this isn't your normal, right? Or this is your normal actual rescue training is what I mean. And they actually see a bunch of these villains kind of come out, and Izuku immediately would jump into action. And it would actually be pretty interesting how fast he would, because he would begin knocking out and swiftly knocking out villain after villain. But there is a bit of a minor issue, you could say, because they do have a bit of a conflict going on while Izuku is actually trying to defeat these villains, and that's between Inasa and Todoroki. Todoroki and Inasa are trying to get along and trying to like actually combine their powers, but they seem to be massively conflicting, leading to actually Izuku getting like pretty injured by an incoming blast of fire. We all know that Izuku has some trouble with sunlight, and fire itself isn't like a weakness or anything like that, but it definitely does injure him and slow down his regeneration to a certain extent. And even when being out in the sunlight, if he's massively injured, he does also have limited regeneration. And he understands this. Like, he knows this to be the case. And it's definitely a detriment for the most part. But he also is kind of annoyed that they can't just flat out work together to the point that, you know, he doesn't have to deal with getting massively injured. Like, seriously. And that is some docked points for obviously Inasa and Todoroki. And Izuku basically tells them to, like, quiet it down. Like, stop freaking going haywire trying to help if they're just going to hurt the situation, as Izuku continues to just basically knock out villain after villain, forcing Gang Orca to actually show his face a little bit earlier than actually expected. And this is where Izuku would even go one-on-one with Gang Orca. But this isn't really your traditional one-on-one, because honestly, Gang Orca doesn't stand that much of a chance. Even with it being the daytime and Izuku having limited regeneration, it doesn't necessarily matter. Gang Orca's strength may be strong, and he may be a pretty strong opponent, but this guy, Izuku Midoriya, has taken on someone way stronger than Gang Orca, and when they begin to fight, the brawl is one that's very impressive, but one that has always been on and always favors the side of Izuku. There's never a time where Izuku falls short, or never a time where he's, you know, not as close as he should be in terms of defeating him. And eventually it leads to the timer running out, where Gang Orca is literally tired out by the fight with Izuku, and Izuku looks completely fine. I mean, he does look a little bit winded, because normally he does have flat out infinite stamina, but unfortunately in the peak sunlight and stuff like that, it doesn't really help his stamina to a large extent, and it does kind of lower his stamina to a certain extent, of course. Now, this would lead Izuku to obviously passing. I mean, he gets his provisional hero license exam, but obviously some of his other classmates, being that of like someone like Bakugo, and then also Todoroki, and then obviously Inasa being part of a different class, but still Inasa as well, would obviously fail, you know, and that would be unfortunate, but that is kind of what happens in the original version of it anyways. And basically he's kind of just, or they kind of have just failed like normal, just in a mildly different way. Now, Izuku would now have his provisional hero license, and this would lead to them continue their training. But Izuku does have a choice here, like who does he want to work with more specifically, right? And there is some really good options, and there actually is somebody, and it's actually 3 people, that want to talk to them about those options, being that of the big 3. And this is Tamaki, Nejire, and also Mirio. And they talk about this, and they kind of have their struggles in terms of trying to explain everything. And this would lead to Mirio saying like, oh, well, how about you guys just all fight me? And of course, this is never going to be something that Izuku leaves down. Like, he is 100% wanting to fight Mirio. And during this fight, or during the up and coming fight, he'll actually learn something that he didn't really know in the first place. Now, for starters, it all starts initially with Mirio saying that he's gonna fight everybody. But Aizawa would tell Izuku that he should not be fighting Mirio as a group, especially with his other classmates. Let his classmates fail, and then he can get his turn against Mirio. In which Izuku would nod and would say that he wouldn't want it any other way. He doesn't want to fight somebody on a handicap. He wants a good one-on-one. And of course, Aizawa, would kind of laugh at this a little bit, but he would kind of know that's exactly what Izuku's response would be. I mean, that's just how he's always been, and it seems like that's how he's always going to be. He always wants a solid one-on-one, depending on the situation, of course, especially if it's a casual one-on-one or a casual fight where it's for training. He's never going to want to take on somebody with a handicap. It doesn't make sense to him. He wants to, like, you know, challenge himself to a large degree, and that's exactly what he's going to end up doing. But in the meantime, it seems as if, well, Mirio beats the living heck out of every single person there. I mean, outside of Izuku, obviously. Izuku hasn't fought yet. But everybody would kind of fall, and everybody would kind of get destroyed to a large extent. And, yeah. And it would now be time for Izuku to get his turn to take on Mirio. And this fight would be an interesting one. I mean, it's not like Izuku is outmatched by any means, because he definitely can beat Mirio, but the quirk that Mirio uses is very interesting. Permeation is something that is definitely giving Izuku a bit of trouble. I mean, he is a martial arts prodigy, but this is something that is far different than you could possibly imagine. Being able to basically dodge punches without actually dodging them is something massively interesting, and Izuku is super taken back and super kind of like interested in the quirk itself, and he's kind of like awe-inspired by it. He's like super interested by it, and he kind of tells Mirio this while they're fighting, but he also says and brings up the fact that Mirio obviously has something within him that is a little bit different than just, you know, your normal run-of-the-mill permeation quirk. He can tell that Mirio has power and strength that is obviously attributed to something else, but he doesn't know exactly what that is, but it doesn't matter at the moment. But after a while, Izuku would obviously and eventually get used to permeation and get used to the fight style that Mirio is portraying. I mean, like I said before, Akaza, or this version of Deku, is extremely good at picking up on martial arts and extremely good at adapting to fighting. And frankly enough, there is no way that Mirio in a long drawn out fight would be able to defeat Izuku. And it seems like over and over again that Izuku's just transcendence into basically herohood, he's going to continuously get stronger and stronger and faster, and his martial arts prowess just helps him in throughout all of this. And Mirio even tells him after the fight, and after, by the way, losing, because Mirio would end up losing here, he would tell Izuku that, well, it seems like Sir Night-Eye has basically the right idea and a real reason to want Izuku on board with him. But Izuku would bring up the fact that he doesn't know, he doesn't really know much about Sir Night-Eye, and he hasn't even talked to him. So how does he know that that's like the whole case? In which Mirio says that he personally works with Sir Night-Eye, and Sir Night-Eye wants him to join his work study. And of course, it's going to be a struggle and tough, but having another person like Izuku on the side of Sir Night-Eye would be pretty beneficial. But of course, Izuku would actually bring up someone else, bring up Mirako. And he would say that he's already promised Mirako a long time ago that he would join her for a work study. And yes, he feels completely honored that Sir Night-Eye would offer him. And if they ever need help, I mean, he would be completely obliged to do so. But he does want to stick with Mirako, and he apologizes for this. And of course, Mirio's like, hey, like, this is not something to apologize for. This is, I mean, it's pretty impressive that you have that loyalty. And of course, this would lead to Izuku taking up a work study with someone that he already interned with, being that of Mirako. Now, how much can he actually learn from Mirako at this point? Probably not as much as you would possibly think, but a team up with Sir Night-Eye is bound to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, we are dealing with someone, or we are dealing eventually with someone very, very, very terrifying in that of, well, the one and only Overhaul. But for now, he continues his training with Mirako, continues getting stronger, and so on and so forth, and awaiting basically that call from Sir Night-Eye. And now it's time to more or less take on this whole Overhaul incident. And this would lead Izuku to actually going on collabed patrols, and would kind of go on these patrols with Mirio, and also just be kind of looking out for the one and only Overhaul. Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to find Overhaul, like, by any means. Like, and frankly, there's probably a very slim chance that you're going to find Overhaul, like, ever. And that would be the case because Overhaul's been kind of out of the limelight and out of the kind of initial area, or flat out just out of like the idea, or even out of kind of the central place that you would kind of be looking for him just right off the bat, right? Overhaul is not someone that you just run into on every occasion. That's just not the case. Overhaul is very good at covering his tracks, but what he can't actually kind of predict for is Eri getting away and getting out of there. And guess what? Now he's dealing with a totally different issue, because on a patrol with Izuku and Mirio, Overhaul runs into the one and only Izuku and Mirio. And yes, Mirio initially would be like, oh, let's chill out, let's try and not go too far ahead of ourselves here. But of course, that's not okay with Izuku. Izuku sees a little girl, yes, a little girl in danger, and that man jumps into action quicker than you could possibly imagine. And he begins to lay an onslaught on Overhaul, immediately pushing him toward a darker alleyway and actually making it so that he's underneath like a barricade of some sorts where the sunlight is actually not hitting him. He begins to just lay an onslaught on Overhaul, and he basically tells Mirio to get out of here and take Eri immediately to a hospital or somewhere safe right now. And he begins to beat on Overhaul, beat him down senseless until Overhaul would just lay a tiny scratch on him and blow off part of Izuku's body. But guess what? Izuku's regeneration is not limited right now, and he begins to grow back his limbs instantaneously, and Overhaul is completely shocked, thinking that this guy right here is what truly shook up the villain world, and he's really going to let him basically kill him right now. Like, he needs to do something ASAP, or he's really going to die right now. In which Izuku continues to beat on Overhaul, his stamina, like Overhaul stamina, being drained entirely, and Overhaul signals for somebody to actually help him, and eventually he does get that help, because Izuku feels this kind of bullet shoot toward him, and he tries to dodge it, but unfortunately unable to dodge it, it lands right in his leg. And as it does, Izuku can feel something within his body, and then he looks up at Overhaul, and immediately Izuku would cut off his own leg and grow it back. Overhaul would be completely taken back by this, how quick a kid can think, and on top of that, how quick he's ready to go no matter what. And there is no hesitation in Izuku's eyes. There is no hesitation, not even one little bit. And I mean, that comes from just natural instinct, martial arts, but also the fact that he's trained with Miriko. Miriko has no hesitation in doing things like this, and she knows the repercussions of not doing it. So the fact is, there is no way that Izuku would allow his quote-unquote quirk to be erased, even if it can be erased, because he felt something deep within, that something was spreading throughout his body. He didn't know what it was. He didn't know if it was a quirk erasure. He didn't know if it was some sort of poison that would kind of degrade his body. He doesn't know, but he didn't care. He knows how well he can regenerate, so he just sliced off his leg immediately and just went on to the very next thing that he had to do, because he knew that if it was something bad, that he needed to handle it right then and right there, and that's exactly what he did. Now, this would lead to Overhaul and the other guy getting captured, and Izuku would kind of drag them in as they would put quirk canceling cuffs on them, and not too long later, they would actually siege Overhaul's kind of whole base of operations, and luckily enough, every single person in there was seized and captured. And it seems like everything is going amazing. Everything is going fantastic, right? Izuku gets to go back and basically team up with his classmates in a bit of a class 1A versus class 1B type of training, and everything is going kind of perfectly. Izuku is kind of just going through everything, going through all these emotions pretty easily, and the training with his classmates and so on, it seems like everything is falling in line, as if basically his road to being a hero is going to be flawless. Well, that's exactly what he thought, until one day on patrol, and being a solo patrol, one of his first solo patrols with the Miriko agency, well, he would walk into an alleyway that he was going to help some people, and he would get blasted with some sort of a ray. Now, this ray would feel very similar to the sunlight, a very concentrated blast that would extremely injure Izuku, even so much so that it would incapacitate him, knocking him out cold and he would only get glimpses of what was happening. He would fall in and out of consciousness over and over and over again as they would concentrate sunlight on him all the time, no matter what, and they would begin to pick through his brain, begin to change him. And as he sees and as he looks up, he sees the same scientist or the same doctor, quote unquote, that he actually had when they were deducing what his quirk was, as if they knew something was up with this kid and always planned to do this. And it seems as if Izuku's mind begins to go and grow over in a fog, and it begins to change rapidly, as if every single word he's hearing in his own head now is all just orders that he needs to follow. And soon he would blink out of consciousness and then blink back into it, and he would see a ruined city, a city that was torn up and broken from a battle. And as he looks forward, he sees many, many people, and all of these people are people that he knows and hold very dearly. Those are all the heroes, from Bakugo, from Mirako, from Sir Night-Eye, and to many others, all standing there trying to stop him. He looks to his sides to see that there are many fallen Nomu all around, and he stands alone. But he cannot control a single thing he's doing. He can feel just this overwhelming sense of lack of consciousness continue to creep in as he continues to fall out of it over and over again. His classmates, his teammates, and so many other heroes that he knew and once knew, well, they seem to be getting beaten and also absolutely destroyed by Izuku himself. But can he break out of this mind control? Is there any chance for Izuku to actually stop this onslaught and save his friends and stop this, what seems to be the last gambit for the villains like All For One and many others? Well, you're going to have to find out in What If Deku Was Like Akaza, the finale. Izuku Midoriya stands in front of the people he knew as his friends, his teammates, mentors, and many, many others. But how did he even end up like this? How did Izuku get to this point? Well, like I said before, and like what happened in the past, he was unfortunately subdued, and experiments were all taken upon him, and he would soon realize that the cloudiness and the mind control that would overwhelm his body would be too much for him to bear. He's just a vessel in the body that he once held, and all he can do is stare at the other people that are currently looking at him. Many of them are ready to fight, but many of them are also hesitant on the idea of truly fighting Izuku Midoriya. Izuku has gained immense strength, being injected with various amounts of what seems to be different quirks, and on top of that has been augmented heavily to the point where he basically has no feelings. He cannot feel anything anymore. And on top of that, it seems as if everything about Izuku no longer exists. But it seems as if this final gambit will now set up the destruction of not only Japan, but the entire world. But the heroes that are there standing to confront him, many, many heroes, they're not going to allow this to just happen, especially not without a fight. Izuku stands there as everybody charges at him, and he begins to fend them all off, and he begins to extremely hurt hero after hero. Even some of the strongest heroes that are known for their capabilities, some of the highest ranking heroes like Endeavor, like Hawks, even like Mirako, well, let's just say they don't even stand a chance. Izuku would begin to beat them down, and beat them down extremely, extremely bad. And they would try everything they possibly can, even special weapons and items that they came up with to maybe expose some of the weaknesses that Izuku has. But it seems like nothing is working. It seems like every single time they try to do something, it seems like every single time they try to actually properly take out Izuku and try to get the upper hand, it never works. It seems as if Izuku's already one step ahead, and if not, he's multiple steps ahead every single time this fight continues on. But that doesn't mean that the heroes are just going to give up. They continue to fight. They continue trying to subdue Izuku, honestly getting to the point where they're trying to find a kill shot to take out Izuku Midoriya. But it seems like every kill shot is not there. And there is a response from Izuku that is 10 times more powerful than you could possibly imagine. He would easily defeat the likes of someone like Hawks and Endeavor, knocking them clean out, if not injuring them almost to the point where there's a good chance they will pass on to the next life. Izuku continuing his fight with Mirako, and Mirako would try to speak to him, try to get through to him, saying that what happened to that sweet guy, that sweet kid that they all once knew. The one that may have had this hunger for fighting, but, well, wouldn't hurt a fly if they were innocent. That one person that wouldn't even hurt a single being, like he was so respectable, so respectful, and on top of that, he would never hurt a woman, not even a single one. And he was even hesitant about fighting Mirako, even though Mirako is one of the stronger hand-to-hand combat martial artists there is in Japan. Where is that person? Izuku would speak and say that person is no more. That person does not exist. But of course, that voice that is being said is not the one of Izuku Midoriya. That's until a lot of the people there get an idea, one that Bakugo even comes up with to a certain extent, and he tells them their plan and how they could actually bring down and take down Izuku, but it's one that's going to be risky. Mirako tells him that he doesn't, or that she doesn't care about risky, that get it done ASAP, and they'll figure out the consequences later, in which Mirako says that she will give the opening for Bakugo, whatever the plan is, and Bakugo would nod, as Mirako would go head to head with Izuku, trying to give it absolutely all she has. And the wounded heroes that Izuku has already put down basically would jump into the battle to try and subdue Izuku as well. And eventually Bakugo would create a giant explosion, creating a huge dust cloud separating Izuku and many of the others. Izuku would look around as his senses would be mildly overwhelmed, at least for the moment. Izuku would dash through the smoke, clearing it out completely, seeing that nobody's there. He would look around, and eventually he would see a shadow, a small shadow, and that shadow, well, is a person. And he would dash toward it, grabbing the neck of this said person until he looks to see who it is. And it's, well, Momo Yaoyorozu. What the hell was this plan? He looks around to the left and to the right as shadows begin to appear, as he basically lets go of Momo and dashes toward the next one. And it's another Class 1A female. And he does it again and again and again, as his mind seemingly slipping away from him now. And he would then hit one more person, grabbing the neck of another, well, female character, or a woman in Class 1A, or a female in Class 1A. And eventually the smoke would dissipate completely. And as he turns to his right, there stands his own mother. He looks at his own mother, seeing all of the flashbacks, seeing all of the fighting, all of the martial arts that he personally went through, everything that he channeled through himself, everything that he did for himself, but also the protection of his own mother, Inko Midoriya. He would look even to his right once again, his mother, and then also someone who he saved at the very beginning of his hero journey, Ochako Uraraka. Seeing her would bring back memories that he doesn't even know, memories that aren't even his own. He would see memories of a dojo with an old master and his young daughter, but it seems as if the daughter meant something to Izuku. No, meant something to whoever this Akaza character is, because when Izuku would look in the mirror, he would see someone else. He wouldn't see himself. He wouldn't see the face of Izuku Midoriya, but he would see the face of someone totally different. He would look around and he would hear the voices of the girl and the father figure that he had in this different life, and he would hear them talking to him, but it was as if it was all clouded, all changed, and all kind of distorted. He would then slowly but surely hear them clearer and clearer, but eventually they would slowly disappear, and a large crowd would stumble through, and Izuku could see this memory. A stumbling crowd would rush through and destroy the entirety of the building. A large group of people, seemingly like a large militia of some sorts, a large crew of people that took it upon themselves to actually barge in and hurt everyone that surrounded him. He could feel the weight, the pressure, everything about this. He looks around once again and he sees the Japan streets that are completely desolate and completely broken. He would see all of the women, but now sees all of the people in general. From women like Momo Yaoyorozu to Midnight to even the males like Bakugo and Aizawa and many others, he would see them all, but it seems like there's still something in the back of his head that is telling him to kill, to stop them, to defeat them, to end them, and to destroy this entire place now. In which immediately Izuku would dash toward Aizawa as if he's about to hurt him gravely, but then he would stop. He would stop right in his tracks and stare at Aizawa, right directly in his face. And as he does, he would tell Aizawa that he's sorry. And as he says this, Izuku would go dashing off to another place, but it seems like he isn't fully in control just yet. They would all tell them that they need to track him down now, that they're breaking through to him. They can't allow them or allow him to settle back into the mind control. But they ask, where is he running? In which someone did put a tracker on him. As they look at the tracker, they would say that it looks like he's headed to the main prison. The one with All For One, Shigaraki, Overhaul, and many others within it. They all think that he's going there to break them all out of prison. That this is the mind-controlled version of Izuku that is going to do something that is going to be extremely, extremely detrimental to Japan and maybe even the entire world. But as he arrives, as he breaks through the prison, releasing villains like All For One, like Shigaraki, and many others, well, all the heroes would arrive, and everybody would stand there in complete shock. I mean, standing there, Akaza, or this version of Izuku Midoriya, stands there staring toward Aizawa and many of the others that he sees as mentors, friends, and teammates alike, and classmates alike. He stares toward them with a blank expression. All For One on his right, Shigaraki on his left. It seems as if this is going to be the end of everything. With Izuku under their control, with All For One and Shigaraki now out of prison, there is nowhere that will be safe. There will be no one that can truly help them. But that's until Izuku would send both of his hands, his left and his right hand, through the chest of both Shigaraki and All For One, defeating and ending both of them in one foul swoop. And he looks toward the heroes and says that he will be the only one, that he will make sure that this world is safe, not only from himself, but from them as well. He tells them that he has so little grasp of control, but this is the only thing he can do now. He will end the lives of the two that could possibly basically end the entirety of lifespan of Japan, and he stands there as the other heroes try and approach him, but he backs up and he tells them not to come closer, that they need to get court-canceling cuffs, they need to get him restraints right now and put them on him now. As they would all be in complete and utter shock, he would scream at them, telling them now, as he would turn to the prison, launching a punch, and it shatters all of the windows within the prison and shatters half of the prison's like basically block off of the entire building. And it destroys so much, and frankly, it probably ends the lives of many villains within there as well. But eventually, Izuku is wrapped up in Aizawa's scarf. Quirk canceling cuffs are placed upon him, and other restraints are placed upon him as well. And Izuku would be taken away and put away to a large extent. But his mind is so clouded. There feels like there's massive gaps in memories that he can't even understand if it's truly him, if it's the past life, if it's the whatever creature that the past life of him became. He doesn't understand it at all. He barely remembers the people that stand in front of him and the people that visit him. He barely remembers his own mother. He barely remembers anything about his own life. But all he knew was that there was an overwhelming sense of justice, of protection, of want to actually help these people. And as he's chained up and he's completely locked down into this area, maybe somewhere even more restricted than even All for One, some people would come visit him, asking if he's okay, if he's feeling all right, if he's getting enough food, if he's getting this or that. But Izuku, he would barely even be talking. He wouldn't say a word. He'd sit there and do very, very little, just a blank expression over his face. And understanding that if he says words, if he tells these people that he doesn't truly know who they are, that it would break their hearts. So he would nod to them every time they would say something. He would nod and nod, kind of in a way telling them that everything is okay. But he would sit there, dormant, sit there with not even a single thought in his mind. Actually, the only thing he could even hear is one shallow and shadowy and distorted voice, a voice of all of that mind control and all of that messing with his mind, telling him to break out, telling him to do things that he would never want to do, telling him to take over Japan, and telling him to end everybody that stands in his way. The voice would be on 24/7 every single day, every single week, every last minute of his entire life. At least that's what it feels like for a long time. Because at the end of it all, after months and months and months would pass on, eventually Izuku would awaken and open his eyes once again. And as he opens his eyes, he sees two people walk in, Shota Aizawa and Eri. As they walk and as they approach, well, let's just say Aizawa says that he may not know who they are, and they could tell that he's definitely not in the right mindscape, that there might be something they could truly do. In which Izuku would sit there, just sitting there with no words, no nothing, no response. And, well, as electricity would fill the entire room, Aizawa would walk out, and Eri's horn would grow as Izuku could feel his body changing rapidly. And eventually the voice, the shadowy, distorted voice, would go away. No longer speaking to him, no longer telling him to go destroy everything. His body changing and his mind rephasing back exactly how it was. And as he looks to the little girl that is standing in his prison cell, basically, he would begin to shed a single tear. As it drops down to his face, he would feel absolutely saddened by everything that he knew he did. Everything that happened. Aizawa would approach after everything occurs, and he would ask if the kid remembers him now. In which Izuku would nod and say, yes, he does, and he's sorry. In which Aizawa would say that was not him, that was not, but Izuku would cut him off and say that was him. He wasn't strong enough, he wasn't mentally strong enough, he wasn't good enough to stop it from happening. and he almost destroyed everything that was created to stop villainy in one foul swoop because he wasn't ready. Izuku shakes his head and he tells them that he'll be here for a little bit longer. That the reverse of all of that and Eri changing everything to do with his mind and body may be a good thing and is an amazing thing for him because the voice is gone, but there's still a lot of mental hurdles that he has to get through, and there's a lot of time that he needs to obviously serve out. So he'll be seeing them soon. And he tells Aizawa to make sure to keep everyone safe, because once this is all over, he'll be becoming a hero, one that is better than any hero Aizawa could have ever imagined Izuku Midoriya could have ever been. Aizawa would smirk as he would point at the kid a little bit, and he would grab Eri and carry her off, and Eri would wave her goodbyes and wish him good luck. Izuku still in that tight space, that space where he's stuck exactly like All for One, kind of contained, but soon he would go through a rehabilitation process and go through all of the steps to hopefully become a productive member of society once again, but also become the hero he knows he could be. But Izuku's road back to being a hero and a productive member of society may just be beginning, but this is the end of the story of What If Deku Was Like Akaza.